Yo, what is going on, everyone? My name is Nick, or the Notorious Fantasy, and in today's video, we're going to be breaking down my top 36 wide receiver rankings and tiers for week number 8 of the 2024 fantasy football season. But before we could get into things, I would like to ask that if you guys are new to the channel and you do end up enjoying today's video, that you please make sure to hit that subscribe button down below. And while you're down there, whether you are new to the channel or not, please make sure that you do leave a like on today's video. It would help me out a ton. If you want to follow me on Twitter or X, please do so at NotoriousFantasy. So without further ado, let's get into my week number 8 top 36 wide receiver rankings and tiers for the 2024 fantasy football season. We begin with the no-brainer wide receiver 1 tier with my wide receivers 1 through 6. At number 1, we have A.J. Brown of the Philadelphia Eagles going up against the Cincinnati Bengals in Cincinnati this week. Every single game A.J. Brown has played this season, he has been a top 7 wide receiver in PPR and has scored a touchdown as well as 20 or more points in every single game. Going up against the Cincinnati Bengals defense that is far from ideal, I believe that A.J. Brown is going to have yet another huge performance this week and is a no-brainer to be ranked inside of the top 6. At number 2, we got Jamar Chase of the Cincinnati Bengals going up against the Philadelphia Eagles in the exact same game. Now, I do believe this matchup has all of the makings of potentially being a rock'em sock'em robots tit-for-tat back and forth high-scoring affair, which is going to elevate both A.J. Brown and Jamar Chase into having humongous performances. We've seen Jamar Chase have multiple games inside of the top 2 at the wide receiver position. Last week, he was the wide receiver 12 and feels like a very good bet to finish inside of the top 6 this week. At number 3, we got Amon-Ra St. Brown of the Detroit Lions going up against the Tennessee Titans at home in Detroit. Now, I'll give a lot of credit to the Tennessee Titans defense because I do believe they're a lot more underrated than people give them credit for, but ultimately, Amon-Ra St. Brown is one of the best wide receivers in the NFL on an offense that is cooking game in and game out. No Jameson Williams means more targets for Amon-Ra St. Brown. He went 8 for 8 last week for 112 yards and a touchdown. He has scored a touchdown or more in 4 of 6 games, and I think he finds the end zone this week as a top 6 wide receiver. Next up, we got my guy Drizzy Drake London of the Atlanta Falcons going up against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in Tampa Bay this week. Last time these two teams played, Drake London had 12 receptions on 13 targets for 154 yards and a touchdown back in week 5. He is now on a streak of 1 or more touchdowns over the last 3 games, and he has 8 or more targets in all of those games. I get the Buccaneers offense might be on the struggle bus without Mike Evans as well as Chris Godwin, but Drizzy Drake London is too legit to quit, like his name was MC Hammer, and all the people in the offseason that were bitching and moaning in the comment section, Nick, you can't draft Drake London as high as you're going to draft him. Well, you can eat my shorts at this point because Drake London has been feasting like a fat kid at a buffet, and I expect him to eat yet again. Next up, we got Tyreek Hill of the Miami Dolphins going up against the Arizona Cardinals. Now, Tyreek Hill has been basically dead for fantasy football ever since Tua Tagovailoa has gotten hurt. But now, Tyreek Hill is going to get that quick revive here this week. I get he is dealing with the foot injury, but unless they have to amputate the foot, Tyreek Hill is going to be a top 8 wide receiver in my rankings every single week. He is one of the best wide receivers in the NFL, and this is a wet dream matchup for him. I believe that Tua is going to be looking for Tyreek early and often in this game, and I wouldn't be surprised if on the first drive the Dolphins have offensively, if Tua chucks up a missile to Tyreek Hill. So Tyreek is a must start this week, obviously with Tua back. Next up to close out this tier, we got CeeDee Lamb. Now, the play of the Dallas Cowboys up against the Detroit Lions prior to the bye was nothing short of disgraceful. It was terrible. They looked absolutely atrocious, bottom of the barrel. Now, do I expect them to go out and beat the 49ers? Fuck no, baby. But I do expect the team to look at least a little bit better out of the bye. And even in that disgrace of a game, CeeDee Lamb was still the wide receiver number 19. So I think CeeDee Lamb and the offense should bounce back in this game. Next up, we move into the slightly lower tier, no-brainer wide receiver 1s. These are all guys you don't really need a thinking cap to throw on to know you want to start these guys. We got Malik Neighbors going up against the Pittsburgh Steelers in Pittsburgh. Now, last week up against the Eagles, 4 for 41. Not very nice, not very good. But prior to that, Malik Neighbors was the wide receiver 6, 4, and 3 with 12 or more targets in every single game, and he had 3 total touchdowns over that span of 3 games. Now, the offensive line is not going to help out Daniel Jones because he's going to struggle to have a lot of time to throw the football, but he's going to laser eyes, lock on to Malik Neighbors. One down game isn't going to make me panic. Again, the matchup was concerning enough, though, to me to knock him out of the first tier. Next up, we got Stefon Diggs going up against the Indianapolis Colts, and Stefon Diggs had an all-time quote that I heard after that Packers game. Before the game, he went ahead and fought the other team, the Packers, and it came out after the game that he basically just takes everything very personally. Who would have known that Stefon Diggs was petty? Right? Shocker, right? Who would have fucking known that? But Stefon Diggs going up against the Colts, I get he kind of shit the bed last week as the wide receiver 46, but the Colts are always a get-right matchup, especially without Nico Collins on the team. Next up, we move to Davante Adams going up against the New England Patriots in Foxborough. Now, Davante Adams in his first game as a Jet, it was a big flop, right? It was like when you bring a girl home, you're all excited, you get back from the bar, you're ready to go, right? Everyone's so excited for Davante Adams, and then you can't get it up, right? Davante Adams gets 9 targets, but only 3 receptions for 30 yards. Sure, we'll just throw that game away, throw it in the waste bin, throw it in the garbage, and say, you know what? We ain't panicking off that. Davante Adams is one of the best wide receivers in the NFL with a quarterback in Aaron Rodgers where he and Rodgers have great chemistry. No need to panic off of the Taco Bell man. I got him ranked inside the 2nd tier. Next up, we move on into the 3rd tier, which is the high-end wide receiver 2 tier, beginning with Jaden Riley-Reed of the Green Bay Packers going up against the Jaguars in Jacksonville. Now, outside of last week where he was the wide receiver 75, Jaden Reed has been very consistent. Now, he was banged up going into that game. He barely practiced all week, but he is off of the injury report for Sunday. So, given that he's not going to be as banged up, I do think it is very likely that he does have that bounce-back game. The Jaguars' defense has more holes than Swiss cheese, so while Jaden Reed did disappoint in large fashion last week, up against the Jaguars feels like a great get-right game. Next up, we got Wiki DJ Moore going up against the Commanders in Washington. Now, despite the fact that the Chicago Bears laid the SmackDown Brother WWF style on the Jaguars prior to the bye in London, DJ Moore didn't get to eat any of the tea and crumpets there. He was the wide receiver 58, but the week prior, he was the wide receiver number 6 with over 100 yards and 2 touchdowns with Caleb Williams looking impeccable. I do believe that DJ Moore is going to continue to be a guy that is a very reliable top 18 wide receiver, especially in a great spot here up against a Commanders defense that couldn't stop me out there. Next up, we got T. Higgins of the Cincinnati Bengals going up against the Philadelphia Eagles. Now, he is limited in terms of... He's not limited. He was questionable is what I meant to say. So he's questionable for Sunday, dealing with the quad injury. He did get a limited... So technically, I was right. He was limited in practice on Friday. He should be good to go. He was the wide receiver 9 last week. He's been a top 26 wide receiver in 3 straight games, and 2 out of those 3 games, he's been a top 9 wide receiver, 7 or more targets, dating all the way back to week number 4. The Eagles defense is a little bit fugazi. This could be a real high-scoring game, back and forth affair here. Justin Gaethje versus Max Holloway. So I'm feeling nicey John Gruden style on T. Higgins. Next up, we got Garrett Wilson going up against the Patriots in New England. While Davante Adams had a not-so-hot performance, Garrett Wilson picked up the scraps as the wide receiver 20. Sure, the team didn't perform all that well up against the Steelers, but there are brighter days ahead. I get the Patriots' defense isn't completely bottom of the barrel, but this feels like the kind of game where the Jets are just angry. They realize, hey, our back is against the wall. If we lose this game, our season is over, and that will lead to the offense percolating, the offense to actually waking up. It needs some smelling salts, but I think they're going to sniff that before this game, and I think Garrett Wilson is going to go out there and have a great game, even though I do still believe Davante Adams outscores him. Next up, we got George Pickens of the Steelers going up against the Giants. Now, George Pickens had what a wonderful world, a wonderful game last week. Wide receiver 2, 5 receptions, 111 yards, and a touchdown. Russell Wilson, Mr. Unlimited, and George Pickens were a combo like peanut butter and jelly. Peanut butter jelly time, right? And George Pickens had his best game on the season by far. And while I am ecstatic about this matchup, I am bricked up just thinking about it. I will note that I would not be shocked at all if Russell Wilson ended up taking a shit directly on your chest. If Russell Wilson ended up having that big game, because again, it wasn't really the best early on, and then he picked things up in the third and fourth quarter when he put the dagger into the Jets, right? I wouldn't be surprised if Russell Wilson kind of backtracked a little bit. So that's what's making me more hesitant, because if I was fully confident in Russie, I would have George Pickens ranked inside of the top 10. Next up, we got Zay Flowers, another guy he's very easy to understand why his usage is what it is, but he's very up and down weekly. Now, he did practice on Friday with the ankle, so he should be good to go. Zay Flowers has been the definition of boom or bust. Wide receiver 35, which I guess isn't technically boom or bust. So besides that game, he's been the wide receiver 35 in week 1, which was okay. Then he was the wide receiver 11, which is very nice. Then the wide receiver 71, 94, basically kicking you directly in the gonads. Then wide receiver 14, 6, and then last week the wide receiver 65. The way that Zay Flowers works is if the Baltimore Ravens offense is piping down the defense and they're running the ball a lot late in the game because they don't have to throw, then Zay Flowers is going to go ghost. He is going to go invisible. If it's a back and forth game, if the Ravens aren't beating the dog shit out of their opponent, then what's going to happen is Zay Flowers is going to have a big game. This game up against the Browns, they're going up against Jameis Winston. So this could be that real big back and forth, really fun game, but it takes two to tango. If Jameis Winston is seeing ghosts like his name was Sam Darnold, if the LASIK surgery didn't work and he's throwing the ball directly to the defense, then this could easily be a game where Zay Flowers is like the wide receiver 50. So with there being so many different scenarios, well, I guess there's just really two scenarios, really good or really bad, I can't rank Zay Flowers higher, even though I do like the matchup to take him higher. Next up, we move to the lower end wide receiver 2s, beginning with former Cleveland Brown, Amari Cooper of the Buffalo Bills, going up against the Seattle Seahawks in Seattle. And I expect Amari Cooper to get hit with the Hawk special here, because I love Amari Cooper. I wanted to rank him a little bit higher, but what ultimately took me back from doing so is I don't know if Amari Cooper's ready just yet to get like the 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 targets that I believe he's going to get here as he gets more and more comfortable in this system. But before we talk about Amari Cooper some more, I would like to give you guys a quick word for our friends and our partner over at Underdog. If you're new to Underdog and sign up using promo code Notorious, or by clicking on the link in the video description, you'll receive your free pick, which tomorrow is Victor Wembanyama, higher than half a total point. And if you take that, you match that with any other player in the NBA or in the NFL, if both of your picks hit, you will get 3 times what you enter into your pick'em. If you do multiple other picks, then the payout will increase. You will also receive a first-time deposit offer of up to $1,000 in bonus cash. So make sure you guys sign up using promo code Notorious or by clicking on the link in the video description to get your free pick plus a first deposit offer of up to $1,000 in bonus cash. If you're watching this on Sunday, then the offer might be something different. It might be an NFL player higher than half a total yard or a different NBA player higher than half of a total point. So make sure you guys check that out. Link in the video description. So Amari Cooper, again, I am very, very high on his outlook for the rest of the season. But this week, I am a little bit pessimistic on just outright saying he's going to get bumped up to 8+ targets. Once he does, he's probably going to move into the no-brainer range at wide receiver. But as of right now, he belongs close to the wide receiver 2 range, where I've got him. Next up, we got Terry McLaurin. Now, if Jaden Stormy Daniels was playing, then I would be sitting here full-throated talking about how I love Terry McLaurin, even though the matchup up against the Bears is very, very tough. I really do believe that Terry McLaurin has the upside to dominate in this type of a game. But with Marcus Mariota under center, we have to lower our expectations. Now, Marcus Mariota actually looked good last week. Was that Fugazi? Was it a one-game wonder? Maybe, maybe not. And the matchup against the Bears isn't the best, but he should be getting 7+ targets, so he's going to be fine. I just think his upside is kind of capped by the quarterback play. Next up, we got Deebo. Now, I would love to rank Deebo Samuel. Actually, we have Devontae Smith up next, then Deebo Samuel. I read that wrong. You that read wrong. Next up, we got Devontae Smith. Now, if you played Devontae Smith last week because I told you to, I didn't tell you to do that, even though I did, right? Devontae Smith had you bent over a table with lube oozing all over your body, Diddy style, right? This was terrible. There is nothing short of a disasterful game. He had 1 catch for -2 yards on 2 targets, whereas prior, he was basically a stone-cold lock to be a top 24 wide receiver, going up against the Bengals after 1 down game, where the Giants were up big, where the Eagles were up big on the Giants, just running the ball late. I don't believe that will be the case this week, and I think Devontae Smith gets back to his old ways, being a reliable top 24 guy. Next up, we got Deebo. Now, I would love to rank Deebo higher, and he is questionable with the illness and the wrist. Pneumonia, now I'm not a doctor, but the fact that he's dealing with pneumonia, sure, he's going to be good to go. That could just impact how he looks. He might be a little bit weaker. I've been sick, and then even a couple days later, you still feel a little bit fatigued. Now, again, I'm as much of a doctor as Johnny Sins, so I'm not going to say Deebo's going to experience some insane fatigue. And while I love this matchup against the Cowboys, no Ayuk, no Jawan Jennings, which basically puts the crown, Biggie Smalls, onto Deebo's head. But I will be more pessimistic than most because I do worry about the fact that he is banged up and is sick, and he played last week, but he didn't do anything, so that also worries me. Next up, we got Jalen Waddle away, Waddle, till the very next day. Now, just like Tyreek, Jalen Waddle has been fucked up the wazoo by the fact that Tua hasn't been there, right? With Tua, he's fine. He's going to be a top 24 guy most games, especially in a matchup like up against the Cardinals where it's a wet dream. It's a great spot, right? But Tua's not there, and the quarterbacks are trash. Jalen Waddle's not going to perform. Now, with Tua back, I think he'll be a little bit rusty early on, and I do believe he's going to feed Tyreek. I still think Jalen Waddle's going to be able to pick up the scraps and have a nice top 24 game. Next up, we got Brian Thomas Jr. Now, Brian Thomas Jr. has been feasting. He's had already 3 games on the season in his rookie year. I almost said his rookie career. His rookie year, where he's been a top 9 wide receiver. But there's also been some real down showings, like week 6 up against the Bears as the wide receiver 65. We just saw the Packers absolutely shut down any offensive attack of the Texans. That concerns me because the Jaguars offense just really isn't the best. But Brian Thomas Jr. has earned a right to be ranked this high, which is why I've got him here. Next up, we got JSN, Jackson Smith, and the Jigba. In my opinion, no DK Metcalf, so JSN should be the wide receiver 1 on this team unless they go with Tyler Lockett in my pocket and feed him the rock. Now, JSN last week, he could have had a good game, right? He had 3 receptions, 6 targets, but only 9 fantasy points. He scored 5 fantasy points. He only had 9 fucking yards. This matchup against the Bills, again, this is a matchup that I really do believe could be high scoring. So JSN without DK Metcalf, you got to be feeling good about that. Next up, we move into the high-end wide receiver 3 range, and it pains me deep down to say this, but Marvin Harrison Jr., you're fired. You've been demoted from being a top 24 wide receiver in my rankings, right? I just can't do it, even though technically he's ranked inside the top 24 because, Kupp already played, and Jefferson already played, who I had ranked higher than MHJ. But man, oh man, another guy that's just super boomer bust. You know the upside's there, even up against the Dolphins defense that's been playing really solid. I think MHJ could really have a huge game here, but the consistency is absolutely 0. Week 1, he has 1 fantasy point, then 29, 17, 16, and then 6, 0, 5. Not good, right? Not good at all. If Kyler and the offense figures things out, Marv could be the wide receiver 1 in any given game. So it's not like you're going to sit him, but we need to teach him a lesson by bumping him down our rankings. Next up, we got Tank Dell, another guy who basically fucked you over, right? Tank Dell, 4 targets, 0 receptions. Again, the Packers defense had the Houston Texans locked up. They threw away the keys. CJ Stroud was looking like DeShone Kizer. CJ Stroud was looking like he was blind out there. And it didn't work. Tank Dell didn't do much. Tank Dell didn't do anything. Diggs didn't do much. But there are brighter days ahead. There are greener pastures ahead, especially up against the Colts defense. That probably couldn't even stop me. Next up, we got Darnell. Here comes the Mooney. Now, the last time these two teams played back in week 5, Darnell Mooney had a great game. 9 receptions, 16 targets, 105 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Do I expect him to do that again? Fuck no, baby. And I do expect the Falcons to let off the gas a little bit, right? I do think the Bucks can still make it work without Evans for time being and without Godwin. But, and this is a big but, shout out to Angela White, Darnell Mooney, or if the Buccaneers are getting smacked here, they're getting smacked from the back, how you like that? Then the Falcons are just going to run a lot with Bijan and Algier, and that's going to lead to Mooney having a down game. But if they get up by a lot, it's probably because Mooney and all the other receivers are involved. So while I'm not as excited as some other people might be, I do think I have him ranked in a fair range. Final guy here is Chris Olave. Now, Chris Olave was dealing with a concussion, so he could not play in week 7. He got concussed in week 6 against the Bucks, which knocked him out for basically the whole game. He put up a nothing burger essentially in that spot. So going up against the Chargers is far from ideal. And Timu Patrick Mahomes being under center, Spencer Rattler, is also far from ideal. So we've got a matchup I don't love, in my opinion, and a quarterback I don't love, in my opinion. So that's bad. But Spencer Rattler has made it abundantly clear that he is going to force feed the ball to Chris Olave. So if that's the case, right, if Olave's getting 8-10 targets here, he's going to be fine. But the offense as a whole is just, like, early on in the season, dude, we were really dick riding, metaphorically, of course, the Saints, and we shouldn't have done that. We very clearly should not have done that. Next up, we move into tier 6, the wide receiver 3 range, with Romeo Doubs, back-to-back weeks inside the top 13. Great spot up against the Jaguars. So if you wanted to rank him ahead of guys like MHJ, Tank Dell, I wouldn't really be surprised. But they still have Jaden Reed. They have Watson. They have Kraft. They have Dontavian John Wicks. There's a lot of cooks in the kitchen. They've got Jacobs. So while this matchup is ripe for the taking, something just tells me that he's going to have a worse game than the last couple of games. I don't think he's going to be a big fat bust, but I just don't expect him to smash as much as he did the last couple of weeks. Next up, we got Keenan Allen going up against the left hands up. Who are we? The Commanders in Washington. Now, last week, prior to the bye, up against the Jaguars, he was the wide receiver 9. He had 2 touchdowns. Now, do I expect him to score 2 touchdowns every week? No. But could he find the end zone against the Commanders? Yes. So that's what gets him a boost into this range. Next up, we have Tyler Lockett in my pocket. Skirt going up against the Buffalo Bills. Now, Tyler Lockett is one of the least sexy plays in fantasy football. We talk about this all year long, and I'll run back the same narrative. Tyler Lockett catches the ball. He makes the business decision. Hey, should I let this burly man hit me? Should I let this guy try to take my head off, or should I just lay down, right? And then what he does is he catches the ball. If it's not a free walk straight to the end zone, if they're not putting up the red carpet, the velvet ropes, to walk right in there, Secret Service is protecting him, they form a circle around him, nightmare, 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 and he can run directly into the end zone, he's just going to fall over. If there's a chance to juke a motherfucker out on the sideline and run into the end zone, he's just going to step out, right? He's old, he's an unk, Shannon Sharp style, he's not taking a big hit. So he makes the business decision, he falls over. So he's going to get 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 targets. But if he's not going to find the end zone, he's probably like the wide receiver 30. So that's why I've got him ranked here. Hopefully he scores a touchdown for you, though, if you've got to start him. Especially with Metcalf, it makes him a lot safer, though. Next up, we got Xavier Worthy going up against the Las Vegas Raiders in Viva Las Vegas. Now, Xavier Worthy saw his biggest amount of targets, his highest amount of targets last week. He saw 8. You're like, okay, Xavier Worthy gets 8 targets? That means he probably had a touchdown. He probably had 80 yards. Xavier Worthy is super fast. He's Lightning McQueen. This, that, and the other thing. Xavier Worthy scored 5 fantasy points. Now, Xavier Worthy, in any given game, could score a touchdown. He could score multiple touchdowns due to his speed, due to his ability. He could get handed the ball. He could catch the ball. He can do it all. Now, they've got D-Hop in town. They're trying to feed Kelsey. Hunt's looking good. So it's like, while the upside is there, like, he could easily score 4 fantasy points just as easily as he could score 25 up against a putrid Raiders defense. Next up, we got D-Hop. Now, D-Hop is expected to play in this game up against the Raiders. His workload is up in the air. I think By Sunday, we should have more reports. Maybe Fat Man Andy Reid will take a second off eating cheeseburgers and will tell us, hey, Hopkins going to play this much. He's playing a decent amount up against the Raiders. They could look to feed him, could look to get him a shot in the end zone. DeAndre Hopkins hasn't played meaningful football in a fortnight at this point. I can't remember the last time he was on a team that was even halfway good. Maybe the Cardinals a couple years ago when he made that crazy catch through three Bills defenders during the vid season, if you guys remember, where there's like no one in the crowd, and he makes one of the most insane catches I have ever seen. And it's like, I'm going crazy in my room and there's no fans there. Such a brutal time. Good that doesn't happen anymore. But there's a lot of fans at Tennessee. I was going to make a joke. I was going to take a shot at Tennessee fans, but then Tennessee fans would be like, Nick, the Titans have won a game more recently than your Dolphins. The Dolphins suck donkey dick, Nick. Don't you know? Don't you know? Yeah, I do know. Okay. But up against the Raiders is a good spot for him. But his workload is so confusing right now to where I don't really want to rank him much higher, but I wouldn't be surprised if he got a couple of targets and found the end zone. Then we got Ricky Parasol. Motherfucker got shot, but he's still breathing, going up against the Cowboys. No Jawan Jennings. Debo coming off the pneumonia. Parasol should see 6+ targets. The Dallas Cowboys defense is terrible. Fugazi. So if Dak and friends can keep up here, then Pearsall could have a solid showing. Next up, we got Khalil Shakira. Now, him and Keon Coleman, you could consider them in a similar range. Now, I don't have Keon Coleman ranked in the flex range because we're not going to talk about, like, there's a lot of guys in the flex range. There's like 10 players, and Keon Coleman is one of them. So if you were sitting there like, Nick, where's Keon Coleman? You said you kind of like Keon Coleman. I do. Keon Coleman and Khalil Shakir, the way I think about it is Khalil Shakir is going to get all the easy stuff. Keon Coleman's going to have to fight for his right to party, right? He's going to have to fight for the catch. He is more of a red zone weapon, though. So Khalil Shakir is way safer, so that's why he's ranked higher. But if you'd rather play Keon Coleman because you like the upside more, that is perfectly fine with me, right? That is a acceptable take. Next up, we move into the flex range where there's just a lot of guys. I'm going to name off some other guys as well. We got Ladd McConkey, who's got the Q tag next to him. He's questionable for Sunday with the hip injury. He hurt his hip, fucking my fantasy teams in the ass because he hasn't really been that great this season, but he's been consistently like a top 36 guy. That's where I've got him ranked. He's going to be fine. They don't throw the ball enough for you to be really excited about him, but he is a talented player, and he's got a lot of grit. Next up, we got Wandale Robinson going up against the Pittsburgh Steelers in Pittsburgh. Tough matchup, but he's going to get 9 or more targets, so he's going to finish inside the top 40. Next up, we got Jacoby Myers of the Las Vegas Raiders going up against the Chiefs. Now, Jacoby Myers did miss up against the Steelers in Week 6 and missed Week 7 up against the Rams, and his coming back party gets to be up against a stout Chiefs defense, which is no bueno. He missed practice on Thursday, so he actually might not play. But I read earlier in the week that he was going to, so maybe I just need to stop reading this fake news, right? Fucking fake news media on Twitter that's telling me that Jacoby Myers might play. If he doesn't play, then just disregard this take. If he does play, he's going to get 9 or 10 targets, so he's going to be okay. Then we got Jalen McMillan, who needs to purchase some hands, right? If he could just catch the ball, he's going to be great. He got 8 targets last week, 3 receptions. He's going to see a similar workload without Mike Evans, without Chris Godwin. If he can just catch the ball up against the Falcons, it'll be great. But the fact is, he hasn't been catching the ball too effectively, so he can't be ranked higher. Final guy here is Cedric Tillman. Then we're going to name off a bunch of other names. Going up against the Baltimore Ravens, he was the wide receiver 10 last week, 12 targets, 8 receptions, 81 yards. David Njoku out-targeted him. They still have Jerry Jeudy. They have Elijah Moore. They have other weapons there. So I'm not going to sit here and fondle the Johnson of Cedric Tillman, because I honestly don't think Cedric Tillman is like this elite player. I never thought that when he was coming into the NFL draft. You were not catching me playing with his balls like a Fushigi, but up against the Ravens in a game that could be high scoring with Jameis, he deserves to be ranked here. And then we've got guys that are off the grid, guys that aren't on the screen, but we're just going to list them off. We got Sterling Shepard of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who is going up against the Atlanta Falcons. I think Sterling Shepard could be the number 1 weapon there. He scored a touchdown this year. I think you could argue he's better than McMillan, who's a rookie. Then we got Cortland Sutton, who is going up against the Panthers. Bo Nix, his target share has been all over the place. He's been throwing the ball. You get the ball. You get the ball. He's like Oprah Winfrey, delving out targets. So it's kind of unknown who the number 1 target will be there. Then we got Michael Pittman going up against the Texans. Michael Pittman has been, I'm sorry, we just went fucking dark right there. He's been dealing with a bunch of injuries, a laundry list of injuries. He's going to finish inside the top 40, but with Anthony Richardson under center, the upside's very limited, or at least in the top 50. Then we have Calvin Ridley, who's also been banged up. He's off the injury report. He's the number one receiver in Tennessee, but he's going up against Detroit. And guess what? Mason Rudolph, the red-nosed reindeer, or I almost said Malik Willis. Now, Packer or Mason Rudolph are not very good. Then we got Jerry Jeudy. He could be the number one receiver there. He might not be. Keon Coleman up against Seattle. He could receive more targets than Shakir. And then Christian Kirk. I can't bury him too hard, but he's fucked us so many times in a row that I'm not willing to rank him any higher. So thank you guys all so much for watching. If you end up enjoying, make sure you guys do hit that subscribe button down below. And while you're down there, whether you are new to the channel or not, make sure to leave a like on today's video. It would help me out a ton. If you want to follow me on Twitter or X, please do so at NotoriousFantasy. Make sure you guys do check out Underdog, promo code Notorious to get your free pick. Victor Wembanyama, higher than half a total yard. You match that with any other pick in the NBA, NFL, and you'll receive 3 times what you put into your pick'em. If you do multiple other picks, the payout will be higher. You'll also receive a first-time deposit offer of up to $1,000 in bonus cash. Check out one of the videos on the screen if you haven't seen already. Love you guys. As always, have a great one. Good boy.